Hi everyone, this is Kurt with Hypnodyne. Today I'm going to showcase some of the first data from our new product AirMax. I will show you the dimensions for reference. This is a very miniaturized product. It's very comfortable, weighs only a few grams, but it gives you insight on tons of data. So we're going to go ahead and just dive right in and open the first night of data that we captured this week. You may be familiar with the software. It's the software that we use to analyze ZMax data. ZMax is our other product that measures EEG, sleep EEG in particular. So this is going to look very similar, except we're looking at a bunch of respiratory signals instead. This first night, and for people that are new to the software, let me just go over what we're seeing piece by piece. This whole red area is called a spectrogram, and it shows you the spectral view that is a signal turned into an image, basically. There's not a big reason to do that when you're looking at respiratory data. It's very useful for EEG, but just to keep it looking similar, we made it like this. And so if you just pay attention to the brightest line at the top, the other two are just replicas. The brightest line here is the PPG, that is to say the heart rate. That is a measure of what you're seeing here in orange and red. And it is the heart rate. So immediately you can see the heart rate is here, then it disappears, and we'll see why, because the person is moving around. They went to the bathroom and everything went crazy, then they settle down, and then you can see the heart rate again. You can immediately see that it goes up here, it's faster. That's the first half of this red spectrogram. You can bring it into focus and contrast by using the mouse wheel. The second half is the thermistor data, and this shows you the respiratory data. So if you look at this, immediately you will notice there are some vertical gaps that we're going to take a look at. But then at the bottom, these two lines are extremely useful. These two lines, one for the left nostril and one for the right nostril, they're just a compact version of this line above. And so if you look at them, you will see either one of three states. Both bright, this means both nostrils are receiving signal. One bright and one dark, which means most likely the occlusion of a nostril. The opposite configuration, where the opposite one is bright and the other one is dark, that's the different nostril issue. Like, for example, I don't think he has one on this recording. Or the fourth state is they both go dark, and that's what you don't want to see. So immediately, if you just don't look at anything else, you just open the file in the morning, you look at this bar, you already know that there are a lot of breathing problems because there are these areas where both lines are very dark. Now we're going to zoom in and look at what that actually means on the signal. As the last thing before we leave this area of the screen, this white line, this represents the head position. There are two icons featuring the head right here. It's a little bit faint. But as I scroll through the signal, you can see them moving because it shows you the head position at the position of the cursor. That same head position is represented here by this line. So a horizontal line is not exactly the best way to display head angle, but I don't have a better way yet. So anyway, here is facing slightly to the left. This is facing all the way to the right. This level in between is facing straight up. The first thing I did when I opened the signal is to check whether these problems with the breathing signal going flat only occur in one position, or maybe they don't really depend on the position. And unfortunately, I found that they don't depend on the position. The reason it would be a good thing to find that they do depend on the position is because if they do depend on the position, then you can use AirMax to start vibrating and stimulating you when you assume that position, hopefully causing you to move around and not have the problems. But for this particular person, these flattenings that we're going to look at in detail from now, they occur regardless of the position. So these are the first thing that I saw when opening the signal. First of all, lots of problems, and second of all, they don't depend on the position. Now we're going to look at the least important features first, so I can click here and remove them and get a better view of the important stuff. Here's the temperature. The reason there's this dip is, like I was saying, he went to the bathroom. It's a cold house, so we have total flattening of the heart rate. I don't know if the signal, if the device came off or what happened, but there's no signal here whatsoever. And that's fine because he's not sleeping, so we don't care. But that's the temperature, so I'm going to close it now. The second thing that you can see is the light. Now, not that useful, but I guess in some cases it could be useful. If you double click on any of these tracks, and this is new in this version of the viewer, it switches from epoch view to full view. Now it's in full view, you know, because if I scroll, the yellow doesn't change. If I go to epoch view and I scroll, it changes. Now the reason I double clicked it to see the full view is because I wanted to see what is it like. We see that the room was dark, so there's nothing really to be gained by looking at the light signal in this case. So I'm going to close that too. Now, this is the amount of noise present in the room. And the reason that is important is because when you have problems with breathing that we're going to take a look at shortly, you want to see if there was any snoring. And you can see snoring. I'm going to tell you how in a moment. First, we're going to get rid of this other signal. This is just beats per minute. This is the heart rate. You can see that there are pieces where the heart rate is very variable, places where it's very constant. And I'm going to close it now. Now, this is the SpO2, which is the saturation, oxygen, blood oxygen content, rather. Do we need it? Yeah, I guess I'm going to keep it on. So let's skip this area because here the person is reading, then they are going to the bathroom, coming back. Okay, so the real signal starts from here. I'm using the mouse wheel to zoom in and out so I can always bring a signal into view. So starting from here, we see that the two nostril signals are good. I want to see what happened in this gap right here. I know that this is just one nostril because one of them is, you can see here, right? One is flat, the other one's working just fine. So this is not a problem. I'm going to move it right here. And then I'm going to move around. And the first thing I realize is that I want to zoom out. This window, the epoch, is 30 seconds because our main product, the ZMax, is an EEG product, and everybody looks at EEG in 30-second windows. In this case, we're looking at respiratory data, so I'm going to go up to 120-second windows, which shows you much more detail. And we see a big flattening of the signal. So this is why these black areas are happening. It's because there's no signal at all right here. It's not good. Now, for people that are used to this viewer, there's a new feature where you can open the same track that you already have. That's SpO2. See, I can turn it on and off. But if I hold down the control key as I turn it on again, instead of turning it off, it adds a second one. And the reason I want a second one is because I want to have both epoch view and full view. So that as I'm scrolling, I know where I am more or less on the SpO2 line, but also I want to see what the SpO2 is doing throughout the epoch. And as I move here in these gaps, I want to see what happens to the SpO2. For that, maybe I'm going to create a little bit more space so that I can see the dips. And then I'm going to go to a good area where there's a lot of regular breathing activity. And we see that the signal is pretty much around 98. This algorithm that calculates the SpO2 is really good in the sense that it's looking peak by peak. It's not averaged out at all. If you use a pulse oximeter, one of those things you put on your finger, well, first of all, having it on the finger is a big problem because it takes tens of seconds before you can see a desaturation on your finger, first. Second, it's low pass filtered. It means that this wave would be so heavily smoothed out that you really cannot see the detail. It's going to look something like this. Okay. And if you're lucky, you can see the dip, but many times you won't even see the dip because with this degree of smoothing and measuring it at the finger, you will completely lose it. So the benefit of having a very good algorithm is that it doesn't get confused. And so when you're looking at these little spikes, this is real data. It's not noisy because the calculation is noisy intrinsically. It's noisy because that's the actual value that got computed. This is a little bit of a pro tip. When you want to validate and you see a big gap between two consecutive readings and you ask yourself, is this real? So a little bit of an inside story how you calculate the SpO2. The SpO2 is calculated by looking at the red and infrared absorbance of the blood. Your hemoglobin passes through the lungs and gets oxygenated, and then that oxygen is transported throughout the body. So the more oxyhemoglobin you have, and the more the absorbance of the blood changes. And now I forgot if it's towards red or infrared. It's one of the two. But here we have conveniently red and infrared plotted in these two colors. Now, can you see that the red component is smaller than the orange component? That is what you normally want to see. When your SpO2 is right about around 98%, that's what you see. When you have a desaturation, the red gets bigger. Now, the absolute magnitude doesn't matter. It's really the relationship. So whether this wave gets bigger or smaller, it doesn't matter. It's how much bigger is the orange compared to the red. And can you see that here they're almost the same? Whereas here the orange or yellowish orange is much bigger than red. This indicates that there's a big gap in saturation between these two readings. Okay, but that maybe was unnecessary. That's perhaps a little bit too complicated. So we're just going to look at the values here. I was just stressing how even though it looks jagged like this, these calculations are all good. That's just how the reading works. Remember that you can only read the signal every heartbeat. So by nature, this is a signal that's computed at time intervals equivalent to your heart rate, so every second or so. So I'm going to look at this flattening, and I'm going to look at this dip. So I want to ask the question, because apparently here there was a flattening of the respiratory signal. What kind of drop in saturation did it produce? So I go and look at two things. First of all, how high was it before the flattening? And I see a 97.5%. Then I go and look after the flattening, what is the lowest, and that's 94.3%. So this is about a 3-point drop. Now, if you're very precise, you might notice, why didn't I measure it here? Because this is where the flattening begins, not here. And the reason is because there's these many seconds of lag between when you hold your breath and when your SpO2 starts dropping, because your blood, you have several liters of blood and it's a buffer. So when I say look before the flattening, it really means what's the last high value that you saw, which for me it's here. So 97.46 to the lowest, which is 94.2. Now this is a little bit laborious, so there's an automatic way to do it. If you click calculate AirMax markers, it does it for you. It says 9 seconds, 93.9 minimum saturation. Note that it calculated it from here instead of from here, but that is just a setting that's going to be exposed at a later date. I found that this works pretty well. In fact, if you zoom it in, you could arguably say that there was still an inhalation from this point to this point. When the signal goes down, you're inhaling, up, you're exhaling, if I remember correctly. So perhaps it's more precise than I was even seeing. Now that we've calculated using this feature, you can see all of the desaturations on this marker track. You can see that they correspond roughly to where these two lines were dark. But the difference is that here you can see even brief episodes that are not immediately clear on the red tracks. If you're familiar with the software, if you push the M key, it takes you to the next marker. Think of it as a bookmark. So when you click M, it's just going to go to the next marker. And this is the part that I wanted to take a look at because it happens to be at the last possible moment. So it's really in between two epochs, even though now we set the epoch to, I think, 240 seconds. So here I use, instead of the regular arrow keys, I use shift arrow. So instead of moving a full epoch, since the flattening occurs there right at the border between two epochs, I do shift right and it moves into view. So this would have been a little bit harder to catch if, let me remove the cursor, if you were just looking at these two lines. You could have caught it. Even if you catch it, it's kind of hard to move the cursor towards it, but if you push M, it just takes you there. And here we see 21 seconds, the minimum is 94.1. And you can keep doing this. You can keep pushing M over and over. Now, the reason there are two colors is that these are more severe. So either the SpO2 is lower than 94 or the number of seconds is very long. Now, all of this is saved in a text file. So if you want to change it and change the colors, and it's going to be configurable pretty soon, so you can decide what the minimum number of seconds is. But this is just a way for you to open your signal in the morning and see what's going on with your breathing. Do you stop breathing at night? Yes or no? Now, we also have an app on the phone, and this is the app that does two things. It records the signal that you're viewing. It's recorded on an app via Bluetooth. But also it's got a function that allows you to deliver a vibratory stimulation during these periods. So I'm going to open a signal that had the stimulation feature enabled. And in this signal in particular, it was not perfect. We perfected it after that. So it still has some glitches, but I want to show you the basic function of how it works. For this, the threshold was set. Okay, it was set to at least 9 seconds. And there's a threshold that says how flat the thermistor signal needs to be before the stimulation begins. The reason I said there's some defects is because here it seems to keep stimulating, so it's not just one time, but it's 3 times, even after you resume breathing. So that's gone now. So just look at this one. It stimulates. Now, how do you verify that? Well, you have the accelerometer, which produces some signal because it's, the whole device is vibrating. And you can see that as soon as this happened, the person resumed breathing. Let's move to another one of these. Here there's a resumption of breathing after the stimulation. In this case, it took 4 different stimulations. So keep in mind they're 2 seconds separate. The distance is 2 seconds. Oh, I was keeping this on to show you the snoring. Let me just show you the snoring so we can close this. Let me see, where does he have a lot of apneas? You know what, I just did something stupid. I opened the stimulation markers for the wrong file. No wonder they're a little bit worse than I remembered. I knew there was a little bit off with them, but I didn't remember it was that bad. It was the wrong signal. There we go, now it's better. So let me show you the snoring so then we can close this to have more space. There's really a lot of data. This is basically what you want with a device like this. You want as much data as possible to figure out exactly what's going on and then see if you can intervene in some way. So here's the noise line. You can see it over the whole recording and you can see it on the epoch. And the reason you know it's snoring and not something else is because look, it's precisely aligned with the respiration, okay? So that's why that's important, because you can see what's happening. You can almost, perhaps you can go to the end of an apnea and see a big snort at the end, which would be this. Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to close it now so we have a little bit more space. I was going to show you the stimulation. All right, so this is one of the problems that occurred because there was a disconnection and it marked it as a stimulation event, which is already fixed. Here is a real stimulation. We need to zoom out again. Maybe that's a little bit excessive. Now this is a thresholding issue. The threshold was set not optimally, not too bad, but not optimally. I mean, what happened is that you see the breathing was getting fainter and fainter. And I'm not even sure why it's going up and down so fast. It could be that that's actually what the breathing was doing. Or it could be the heart rate that's visible on the respiration. This is something that happens sometimes. And it's interesting to have it because if that's what it is, it shows you that the airways are actually open. I want to stay away from the medical stuff because we are a fitness tracker, we're not a medical device and all that. You know how it works. I'm going to talk about the signal going flat. Doesn't mean anything other than that. It's not an apnea, talk to your doctor and all that. But yeah, the defect I was mentioning, you see, is stimulated 4 times. You should have stopped here. It's not doing that anymore, thankfully, so that's already solved. So don't pay attention to the fact that the stimulation lasts a little bit too long. Just look at the first one and where it occurs. Okay, like here, this is a good example. So we have all of this flat part of the signal. Thermistor has no data. There's a stimulation which immediately causes the person to resume breathing. Now, the results of applying the stimulation on this particular person, I'm going to see if I can bring it up and show you the diagram, although I haven't prepared it. Let me see if I can open it up and show it on OBS. We plotted 3 nights, 2 baseline nights, and the 1 night with the stimulation. Here we go. So, well, I'm going to tell you what it is, and then I'll just post it on the website so you can take a look at the diagram by yourself. But the minimum saturation during one of these events in the 2 test nights without the device, or rather, well, with the device but without the stimulation, it went down to 88. And there was a lot of there were a lot of events between 90 and 92, dozens of them. With the stimulation that you're seeing right now, on this exact night that we're looking at, it was never below 92, and there were no events longer than 22 seconds. Whereas before, half of the events were above 22 seconds, with the maximum being 33 seconds. So we managed to slash the duration of these events from, did I say 33 to 22 seconds, and to reduce the amount of desaturation from going down to 88 to going down to 92. Now, as you can see, they're still happening, and this is configurable. So you can change the settings and say, well, stimulate me when it's only been 4 seconds. You can do that, but I noticed that sometimes you breathe so slowly that if you do that, it's going to stimulate you even when you're about to breathe again. And this is an individual thing. The good part is that if you open on the viewer, like we're doing now, the data, and then you use this feature, you can calibrate it, you can test it, and then once you know what the right minimum amount and what the minimum amplitude is that you want to target, then you can enter it into your app, and then it's going to stimulate you based on that. Here's another incidence where we can see the heart rate on the thermistor. This is because if your airways are closed, you would not see that. This would be totally flat, but if they're open, even just your heartbeat is sending out enough air. It doesn't happen all the time. You have to be in some positions rather than others, like your thorax cannot be compressed by something. Maybe it's because he was sleeping on the side, I don't know, but you can see them. See? But as soon as the threshold was met, you have all this big area of flat signal. The stimulation kicked in, which you can confirm here from the accelerometer vibration signal, and the breathing resumed. And let's see what happened to the SpO2. Started out pretty well, started out 97. It went down to, by the time we did the stimulation, it was a 95. It continued to drop after the breathing resumed. It went down to 95. And it stayed there for a while, and it would have come back up, except that there was another problem immediately after that. So when you have this type of thing going on, Sometimes it doesn't have enough time to come back up. I find that to look at the SpO2, you really want to zoom out all the way, because otherwise you can't see this drop. So event 1, desaturation 1, it goes down to 95. This one goes down to 94. It's not that serious. Like, I'm using the mouse wheel to enhance it so we can see it happen, but it's not terrible. The other thing you want to keep in mind as you look at these signals is that the baseline is not always the same. And I don't know why that is, but in this particular area, the good signal is a 95. But if we move over here, a good signal is a 96. So the baseline, you have to look at the drop. It's not so much... Here's a lot of problems. And interestingly, despite the stimulation, the problem continues to happen. But we don't know what would have happened had the stimulation not been delivered. Because, and I'm going to open the file that we were looking at before, which was the night without stimulation, just to compare it. Let's go to the same zoom level. So here we have this length, and here it's well, now I zoomed out all the way. I'm not used to this scale, so I don't know how long that is, but let's say 894 to, yeah, it's 25 seconds. So this used to be a 25-second interruption in the breathing rhythm, and here we have 5 seconds is what it looks like to me. But, you know, we can calculate it. The only reason I haven't done it is because it's going to override the stimulation markers, but we can do it. We can do it and then zoom back in so we can read it. So it's 13 seconds. And that, like I was saying, this depends on the threshold. 9 seconds, 7 seconds. So this is a zone in which you stimulate and then you get the same problem again. And then you stimulate and you get the same problem again. And what we're doing, which I think is useful, is to prevent this flat area from continuing. So the SpO2 goes down to 93 and not below. And that's why I was saying to you, you can go and check out the diagram on our website, but we eliminated all of the desaturations lower than 90. Did I say 92? Something like that. Anyway, shaved off 4 points in the desaturations. All right. Now let me think if there was anything else. Perhaps this can be okay as a first video. Let me just summarize what we've seen. There's a lot of stuff because, well, it's a device mostly meant for research, and the more data you have, the better. But like I said, when you open this data in the morning, you're looking for periods of darkness in the two lines. And since I use this one to explain that, perhaps we can switch back and forth. See, I mentioned this area, for example, in this area. If we move to the other recording, you can see that these areas are much smaller. So you can, for example, take a look here. I'm going to open a third signal, and you can try to find out where these areas are. And I'll give you a few seconds to guess, so you can see if you got it correctly. So you have a few seconds to focus on the bottom of the spectrogram, the red image, and try to find gaps in the two horizontal bars at the very bottom. So let's see if you got it. I see one over here, fat one, some very thin ones over here, and a big fat one over here. You have to close some of the stuff to be able to see something, and then use the mouse wheel. So, and then zoom out. And there we go. This is again the same pattern of normal signal, flattened signal, normal signal. There's another one, it seems, here. But it's not too bad because although the signal is decreasing in magnitude, there's still some signal going on, so it's not as bad. I'm just thinking whether there's anything else that I should cover. Probably not. You can compare nights. It's quite useful. However, if you compare nights, you want to have the same scale. To get the same scale, one way is to close everything else. So this is night 1. Oh, then Alt R will reset the scale. So night 1, this is the worst night, and you can see that not only is the SpO2 low, but it keeps dipping, and it's very noisy as a waveform. Night 2, it was much better with these prominent areas of jagginess, and night 3 is highly stabilized. This is the night with the stimulation, but still has some issues over here and some issues over here, but not dipping as much. Oh, perhaps you can keep an eye on this line. This is the 90 SpO2% line. You can see that there are dips below 90, and here doesn't, except this one. And here we're staying way above 90. So these are the stats I was giving you before. Now, all of these tracks that we viewed are exported in EDF format. And there's more tracks that I still haven't incorporated into the viewer that you can import. And these values for SpO2, for the beats per minute, and all that, they're available in text format. So if you want to do a longitudinal study of your own sleep data and say wear the device over days or weeks or months, you can do that. Yes, I do actually have one parting comment, which I think is interesting. When we did these 3 nights of recording, I expected to see pretty much the same situation every day. Instead, what we found is that the first night he had 150 apneas, the second night he had 75, and the third night he had 43. And this leads me to think how important it is to be able to monitor many nights, because if you do a study like this in a hospital, let's say, and they only check one night, you could see a very mild problem or even no problem at all. It really varies day to day by a lot. Now the question is, what makes it vary? And we don't know. But this person in question continues to wear the device, and he knows that one day he went walking before bed, one day he took this medication. He's going to try to figure it out. We're going to try to establish a pattern so that hopefully if there's any daily activity that goes and interferes with breathing or makes these events more numerous, that we can figure it out. We're also going to keep optimizing the stimulation parameters. For now, like I was saying, we used 8 seconds, and we set an amplitude for the minimum amplitude of the breathing signal to, I think, 150 counts. We're going to keep changing that and see if we can get the perfect parameters. And there's another thing that you can do. Now the vibration on the AirMax is a preset intensity, but you can change the duration. I think that I can show you here that the first time that it stimulates, it's actually milder because it only lasts a very short time. But in case you don't move, then it gets longer. Let's see if I have an example of that. Trying to not get confused with actual movements. Let me load the make sure it's the right file that we're on. Okay, stimulation. Well, let's go to some of these. I'm gonna have to zoom in. See if I can find that. Yeah, look, the sampling rate on AirMax is lower because it's a Bluetooth device. It tries to use as little current as possible, make the very tiny battery last up to 16 hours. So the resolution is a little bit crap, but you can see that this one is more intense than this one. And the reason is that the first stimulation, it only lasts a very short time. The second gets more intense. This regime of how to increase intensity, where to deliver the first one, it could easily be that maybe the first one, which is often ignored, as you see, the person really resume breathing after this, not after this. So maybe we should move this closer to the beginning. There are going to be a lot of parameters that you can tweak to find which stimulation protocol is best for you. Obviously, you would know if you woke up on the first and you see, oh, well, why is there another stimulation right away, and you're awake and you can determine that, you can then change it. But I think this is very close to optimal, with the only problem, like I was saying, that it gives you an extra one just for good measure after you already started breathing. Or maybe I'm overstating that because I don't see the problem right here. Anyway, it's all under development. It's a brand new product. This is the first true bunch of data files on a person that does have sleep apnea. So I hope that this can be useful, or maybe just even interesting to you. And I guess I'll follow this up with more recordings. The next step is to acquire ZMax and AirMax data at the same time, which we tried, but we had some technical problems anyway. Having done that, you would then be able to see the EEG then superimposed with the respiration. And we developed a really good algorithm for the synchronization, because they're two different devices, so it's not easy, but you can see them very well superimposed. And based on that, it would be an excellent setup because it's very comfortable. It's much more comfortable than having ZMax on the head with the ZMax nasal sensor, which normally just is inserted as a plug-in. To actually have ZMax and the AirMax is more comfortable. It allows for the stimulation. So we'll have more recordings, and I'm really curious to see what else we can gather from this particular subject, because there's so much variability in between the 3 nights that I think that the stimulation is definitely having an effect, because the one thing that didn't vary without the stimulation is how much desaturation there was, and definitely only with the stimulation where the maximum length of the apnea is cut to 23 seconds, 25 seconds. But as far as there's too much variation, night 1 was baseline, it was 150. Night 2 was also baseline, and he only had 70. So I think that in this case, to really understand what's going on, we're going to need a couple of weeks of data. But that's what I was trying to say before about having a tool like this, because there's no way that you can go to a hospital and do a type of monitoring like this and spend weeks there. And so really to measure what happens over weeks, and maybe you can annotate and take notes and say, which medicine did you take, when did you put your exercise. Yesterday he was telling me I also tried to sleep on my arm or keep my hand under my head. If you find something that works that reduces these events from 150 to 40 or to 5, then there would be a big improvement. All right, that's all I have for today. I hope I didn't ramble on too much, but look, it's live. I'm also noticing new things as I'm talking to you, so it's a little bit distracting, honestly. Maybe I should have slides instead. Thanks for watching, and have a good day.